welcome to Green TV. This is the show dedicated to green, positive solutions and the third-party and independent candidates that advocate for them. I am Gail Parker, your host, and we're honored to have with us today Emmy Award-winning journalist and author, Mr. Ed Rabel. Americans across the nation welcomed Ed Rabel into their homes as CBS News reporter covering the Vietnam War. Mr. Rabel's reporting experience on CBS and NBC spanned 5 decades of world-shaping events. Mr. Rabel's newly published book, Black Gold, Black Death, In Coal Country, America's President is Marked for Assassination, coincides with his run for Congress in the state of West Virginia. Welcome, Ed. May I call you Ed?
Absolutely.
Great. And what is it that compelled you to run for Congress?
Well, you know, I, as you pointed out, was covering the world, if you will, for both CBS and NBC. And I was born and reared in West Virginia, in Charleston, near Rabel Mountain, in fact. My family has an entire mountain named after the family because my relatives, my great uncles and my grandfather on my father's side were farmers there. But now those mountains, that beautiful Rabel Mountain and other mountains in my state are being ruined, destroyed by the coal barons and by big corporations. They're lopping the tops off of mountains. 500 mountains in America have been destroyed. And guess where they are? All 500 of them are in West Virginia. So I looked around and I saw that not a whole lot had been changed in the time that I had been away covering the world. And I came back to West Virginia to write my memoir and also to write this book, which is a fantastical book of fiction about how in southern West Virginia, in the coal fields, there is a palpable hatred for the President of the United States, President Obama, because of his alleged war on coal. Well, the truth is, it's both deceitful and dishonest for politicians in my state to say that the administration is conducting a war on coal. The reality is, in my state, less than 6% of income comes from coal mining. Less than 3% of jobs come from coal mining. So the reason I'm running in the 2nd Congressional District for the United States House of Representatives is that I think we can do better in West Virginia. I believe that we can, particularly now that the EPA has announced its initiative with regard to trying to reduce the emissions by 30% in our country, carbon emissions, that is. I think we can be the leaders in that, if we will, through using our flattened mountains, if you will, to put in wind farms and solar power and so on. So what we're doing is pushing back against those corporate interests and trying to show a new way, and I'm trying to give West Virginians a voice that they've not had traditionally.
And what led to your decision to run as an independent or a third-party candidate?
You know, that's a very good question. And just before the 2012 presidential election in West Virginia, I was invited to speak before a gathering of Democrats in Kanawha County. I was invited to speak because nobody else would speak for the President of the United States, Obama, at this gathering. No Democrat would speak on his behalf. I was the only Democrat, and I was a Democrat at that time, who would speak on his behalf. Well, there were, you know, the Democrats, some Democrats, enlightened Democrats, if you will, in West Virginia, cheered me on, but there were a lot of people who didn't like that in the Democratic Party, in the established Democratic Party. A Democratic Party that has, the politicians have moved very far to the right. In fact, they've kind of morphed with the Republicans in the state.
It's one party.
It's one party, exactly right. And so what has happened is I think that I'm saying the things that the Democrats ought to be saying, and the Democrats won't have anything to do with me because I do have these progressive ideas that I think will, you know, in Kanawha County recently, 300,000 of my neighbors, citizens of 9 counties, their water was poisoned by a coal-related industry, a storage company that whose chemicals got into the water system, and to this very day they're drinking bottled water there in Kanawha County. That's absolutely unconscionable.
Right.
So for those reasons, and because the Democrats are apologists in my state for the polluters, and for that reason, I felt I no longer could be a part of the Democratic Party, and that I should run as an independent to give people a voice that the Democratic Party was not giving them.
And do you have a positive solution that you're putting forward in your campaign?
Well, absolutely. One of the things we want to do is a moratorium on fracking and mountaintop removal in my state. In other words, no new permits should be given until we determine exactly what's going to happen if they're fracking or if they're trying to remove the tops of mountains. Right now, incredible amounts of poison flow into the streams from mountaintop removal. An incredible amount of destruction is done to the countryside, and people are getting higher rates of cancer there. They're getting higher rates of diseases and illnesses as a result of this. And so what we want to do is put a moratorium on that. That's number one. There are many other things that I want to do, and people, if they want to take a look at my platform, can go to rabelforcongress.com and see the whole thing. But I would be glad to enumerate anything else that you might on what we. But that's the immediate thing that we want to try to do.
Many of those things are advocated for by the Mountain Party. Are you working with the Mountain Party?
Yes, we are. In fact, I've encouraged the Mountain Party membership to try to embrace what I'm doing. And the reason I ran as an independent was to try to reach out to a much larger audience in West Virginia. The Mountain Party does good work, and the people in the Mountain Party stand for the right things, and I stand with them for those things as well. But I just feel that in order to be effective and perhaps even win this race in the 2nd Congressional District, I have to appeal to a much larger audience, and I want the Mountain Party people to come along with me.
I see. Well, what are the things that you would like for folks to know about your campaign? Do you have 3 main points of your campaign?
Well, sure. My campaign is a campaign that is progressive. My campaign is a campaign that is based on a new beginning for West Virginia in terms of a new economy, jobs, a fixing of our infrastructure, which is in terrible shape, and also the idea that we have to move forward in our state and get away from the traditional extractive industries if we're going to make any headway at all. And if our people, Charleston, West Virginia, was voted recently by Gallup, not voted, but the Gallup people did a survey there. And it was determined by Gallup that Charleston is the most miserable city in the entire nation. And the state is the most miserable state in the entire nation. Now, that hurts me, and it hurts the people of West Virginia. I know that they're better than that, and I know we are better than that. So what I want to do with my campaign is not only to try to open eyes about our dependence on these extractive industries, but also to try to show the way that we can be a terrific state with our natural resources, with our water, with our mountains, with the beautiful scenery that we have, and for tourism to be exploited there, among other things. So I just think West Virginia and West Virginians are better than they're portrayed, and so I want to try to show the world that that's the case.
And do you see the solar industry, the wind industry, and geothermal as a replacement industry for the coal industry?
Well, not necessarily replacement, but certainly we ought to, I think it would be ironic if the state of West Virginia, known for so long for its extractive industries, its coal industry, that if we could, move ahead as the leaders in the development of solar and also in geothermal and also wind, if we could be the leaders in that, then I think that the role that coal plays, while it probably will continue to play somewhat of a role in our national energy policy, if we could just show the way by establishing wind farms and solar and geothermal and also the technology of the new energies, then I think that that would be remarkable and show the world that West Virginians have it in them to do something different.
I see, and in your view, I know you've reported from Vietnam during the war. In your view, would these alternative energies be an alternative to a war for oil?
Well, certainly, if we depend less and less on Middle Eastern oil, and now we are, you know, the problem with fracking is that we do get natural gas, which is a cleaner fuel, but if it's not done properly, if fracking is not done properly, the methane gas escapes, and that's far more damaging than the carbon that is, you know, for every pound of coal that we burn, 2.5 pounds of carbon dioxide are spewed into the atmosphere. Well, methane is even more dangerous than that. So, but what we can do is, and I know that we have capacity, the ability in West Virginia to do this, is to be the leaders, the tip of the spear, if you will, in developing these new energy sources, and I think that that will bring about a means by which we can not have this tension, the tension that we have had in the past that has led to these wars in the Middle East.
I see. Well, is this your first time to run for office?
It is my first time. I have had my eye on my home state when I was out covering wars and rumors of wars all over the world. I've kept my eye on my home state. My family is all there. The protagonist in my new book, Black Gold, Black Death, in Coal Country, America's President is Marked for Assassination. The protagonist is a fellow by the name of Wilhelm Metz, who was indeed my maternal grandfather, who died of injuries suffered as a result of injuries suffered in a coal mine accident in Kanawha County in West Virginia. He doesn't die in the book, but he lives. But at the same time, he is a fascinating character with an incredible background, and so the book portrays through him and through his eyes and through the eyes of his wife and other people, obviously, in the book, the problems that we are afflicted with, and not only the problems that beset West Virginia, but also the way in which politicians in our state pander to the fears of the people, and by continuing to harp on this notion that there's a war on coal. That's indecent, I think, and dishonest, but they do it, and they have been getting away with it. I'm trying to expose
coal has
that.
a war on us, on them.
That's right. Well, in a way, you know, what we have here is when they talk about coal, they don't really talk about communities. They don't talk about coal miners and their families. They talk about the coal industry. And people have got to understand that, you know, we need a serious dialogue about the future of coal in West Virginia. And I think that coal miners are coming. In 1948, there were 126,000 coal miners in West Virginia. Today, there are fewer than 20,000 coal miners in West Virginia. It's a remarkable decline. That decline started long before the Environmental Protection Agency was even invented. It started out long before the Clean Air Act ever came into being. And so the notion that somehow, if the EPA were to go away tomorrow, that coal would come bounding back, that's fallacious. It's crazy. It's just not true. And so, but people are buying into that because the politicians continue to harp on the notion that President Obama is trying to kill the state and kill coal. Nothing farther from the truth.
I see. Well, Ed, since it's your first time to run for office, have you had any surprises? Is it what you expected it to be? Well,
I think that, you know, in my time, my career as a correspondent for both CBS and NBC, I ran across a few politicians in my day. And so I saw what they were up to, and I learned a lot of tricks, if you will. And I'm not suggesting that I'm playing tricks on the people of West Virginia or the voters at all. But I covered Jimmy Carter's campaign for the presidency, for example, from the moment he left Plains, Georgia, all the way to the White House, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I covered that campaign. So I saw I was one of those who I questioned his policies and his ideas along the way, because that's the job of a reporter. So I know what we're up to, and I know the questions that are going to be asked, and I'm not suggesting that I have all the answers by any means. But I think that the main thing is it's not a surprise at all. I don't think I've really been surprised so far, knock on wood. But I think the thing that is discomforting and disquieting and unfortunate is that people get sidetracked on the hot button issues. I'm talking about issues like abortion, I'm talking about all these hot button issues that women's rights and those kinds of things, which are important issues. I'm not suggesting that they aren't. But I think that there are other issues in the state that I'm trying to really promote, that on which the lives of the people of the state are dependent, and these other issues, we can deal with those things, but I think the important things are try to deal with this whole question of the environment, of our future in West Virginia, where we're going with the extractive industries, what role coal will play in the future. All of those things are terribly important. I take those things up in the book, by the way, but also that's what I'm trying to do on the campaign trail as well.
I see. And have you established a position on trains, more trains and less traffic? Do you see that as a positive solution for West Virginia?
Yeah, I think so. One of the things that bothered me about when I came back and looked around is that West Virginians had an opportunity, for example, to build a brand new airport between Huntington and Charleston. And in between Huntington and Charleston, there's a corridor. And that corridor could have been served very well with a train, if you will, or trains. That's the future that I see. But unfortunately, many of those people who are in local county commissions and so on wanted to protect their fiefdoms, so they wouldn't abide by the notion of building a brand new airport. The airport we have is a mountaintop airport, one of the most dangerous in the world at Charleston, West Virginia. It was built right after the Second World War. Can you imagine? I mean, it was built for prop aircraft. It wasn't built for modern day jet aircraft. So what I'm saying to you is we need to modernize in West Virginia. One of the ways to modernize would be to build that corridor with the train transportation and communication. And that's the future, I think. And I agree with you with your promoting train traffic or train transportation, because I think that really is important, especially, we have 800 million automobiles on highways in the world today. It's expected that we're going to double or triple that number of cars. We've got to figure out how to deal with this transportation issue.
Right. Well, do you have a position on the debt? The national debt is now at $17.5 trillion.
It is.
Do you have a solution to that?
This is something that is really hard for many people to come to grips with, and that is that the national debt is not like credit card debt. It is not like your home mortgage debt. We've been in debt. I think there's only one time in our history when we haven't had the national debt. And what the national debt really is, and I'm not lecturing you because I know you know this, is that we have to approve spending based on the indebtedness that we have incurred in the past. And all administrations have done this throughout history. So while on the one hand, it would seem that if you pay down your credit card debt, that you're getting out of debt, I don't see it that same way. I think that we have important projects, important things that we must use our national resources for. And we have to look at the national debt in a little different way than people traditionally look at it.
I see. Okay, let me take my look. I have
yes,
questions here. Well, tell me about your experience as a news correspondent. What did you enjoy most about that experience and what not so much?
Well, I think I didn't like getting called at 3 o'clock in the morning some mornings and having to, leave my home for weeks at a time with no notice given. But that came with the territory. And so there were 4 phases basically in my career as a correspondent. One, I covered the civil rights movement in the South, and I was based in Atlanta. I interviewed Dr. Martin Luther King on camera about a few hours before he was assassinated in Memphis. I covered the entire civil rights struggle with all the iconic figures of the civil rights movement, including Andy Young and all of the other iconic figures that come to mind. And then I went off and covered the war in Vietnam for more than a year, and from the combat operations there. I didn't like very much being in Cambodia and almost being overrun by North Vietnamese tank-led forces. I didn't particularly care for that. And I went on to cover the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in Israel, where I was based for 2.5 years in Tel Aviv. And then I came back and covered America. And I think that I worked for a broadcast called CBS Sunday Morning with Charles Kuralt, a wonderful program. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not. It's still on the air. It's a wonderful show, and it gave us an opportunity really to do more than 1 minute 30-second pieces. This was an opportunity to do long-form pieces in which we were able to go out and actually talk to people who were experiencing one form of difficulty after the other. And so getting to know those people, and those were the real heroes in America, the people of America, and that show gave me an opportunity to do that. So that was definitely a plus. The other thing, though, that I think I find truly troubling and terribly bothersome is that almost consistently we are at war in one place or the other, and I that's not just theoretical for me. It was personal and upfront and close, and I just see the destruction and the horror and the suffering that people undergo when they're in the midst of war. Innocent people, not combatants necessarily. And those are the things that I think that troubling, and that's one of the reasons I would like to be in a United States House of Representatives member, because I think that I could make a contribution from the experience that I've had in terms of covering wars and rumors of wars, if you will, and being able to help at least our national security leaders and the Pentagon, and where I was served, by the way, I was the NBC correspondent at the Pentagon, national security correspondent for 4 years, from '93 through '97, and so I learned a lot about how we deploy forces all over the world, and about America's strength and power, and how not, as President Obama recently said, even though we have the best hammer, every problem is not a nail. And so I learned that that's a reality as well.
Okay. All right. Well, I believe that it's time now for us to cut to the spotlight, the candidate spotlight. And this time, I'm pleased to say that we'll be spotlighting Gail Farrell Parker, who is a candidate in Virginia's 1st Congressional District. I'm Gail Farrell Parker, candidate for U.S. House in Virginia's District 1. I'm a businesswoman, a retired Air Force veteran, and governmental budget analyst. I'm the mother of 3, a grandmother of 4. I ask for your vote for 3 reasons. I want to remove the barrier at the federal level that prevents the building of rail. The current policies say to municipal and state governments, if you build roads, the federal taxpayers will pay 80%. If you build rail, the federal taxpayers will pay 20%. The playing field should be leveled so that our municipal and state governments can solve transportation issues with mass transit, rail. We need more trains, less traffic. Second, I want to ensure we adhere to the Arms Export Control Act and to the U.S. Constitution so that we have someone to lobby on the sale of arms to foreign governments. The U.S. Congress is the approval authority for the sale of arms stipulated by the U.S. Constitution, not the State Department, not the Department of Defense. And lastly, I ask for your vote because this election is about your tax dollars and our children and our grandchildren's future. The federal debt, now at $17.5 trillion, makes the interest payment on the debt the third largest expense in the federal budget, just the interest payment. By building rail and stopping the illegal sale of arms, we can grow the economy, create new eco-jobs, cut dependence on foreign oil, balance the budget, and eventually pay off the federal debt. Rail returns $25 to the community for every dollar invested. Folks, I have faith in building rail. Better rail service will greatly improve the quality of life for folks in District 1 and, in fact, for the entire Commonwealth. Fairfax County is forecast to grow by 1.6 million people in the next 20 years and coincidentally by 1.6 million new jobs. New tracks, more trains more often will ensure that folks in District 1 will continue to have viable access to those good-paying jobs. Rail will make us safer, help us to have cleaner air, cleaner water. We will create new green jobs and reduce the debt by building rail. That is why I am the best choice in this race. Citizens of District 1 want new tracks, more trains that run more often in District 1. Send me to Washington. I promise you I will work relentlessly and I will get the job done. More trains, less traffic. Vote for Gail Parker on November 4. Ed, thank you so very much for being on the show today. It's just been such a pleasure meeting you.
That's my pleasure, thank you. And I thank you so much for inviting me to come over. I hope that what I had to say was worthwhile.
It was, and I hope you'll be back again.
I surely will. I'll be glad to do that.